they definitely have sort of an ability to represent kind of or understand abstract concepts. And there was another recent thing where a scientist, I think Denise Herzing anyway, is her last name. She had done something where they basically use an underwater keyboard that creates sounds that are kind of within the acoustic range of what dolphins can normally do. To like create words for different things. So once they use these, like they say like, this like squeak, 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 like means, seaweed or whatever. And then the dolphins will like pick that up and they'll use that word like among themselves,
Wow,
so,
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Seaweed.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. Like they'll pick up that term for like a toy or whatever, and then they'll talk about it like among themselves. And like with their trainers, they'll use the term. Wow. Yeah. So
that's pretty impressive. And I feel like there's a lot you could do with a movie about a dolphin conspiracy to assassinate the president. But I thought maybe it might be interesting just to read the very brief review by Pauline Kael of The Day of the Dolphin.
Yeah,
when it
that
came
pissed
out
me
in
off.
1973.
I have a
pissed me
theory
off
about
too.
Why people didn't like the movie. But anyway, we can read her review. All right.
Okay, and it'll also give you a little bit of a concept of the plot. So she wrote, the most expensive Rin Tin Tin picture ever made, with a gimmick the Rin Tin Tin pictures never stooped to. The dolphins here are dubbed with plaintive, childish voices and speak in English. Mike Nichols directed this elaborate exercise in anthropomorphic tear-jerking, which turns the dolphins into fishy human babies. George C. Scott is the godlike dolphin trainer, whom they call Pa. The movie is about a plot to assassinate the president by using the dolphins Scott has trained as bomb carriers. The star dolphins, Alpha and Beta, foil this attempt, just as Rin Tin Tin would have done. But this isn't a happy movie. Nichols and the writer, Buck Henry, who adopted the Robert Merle novel, exploit Watergate and the political assassinations of recent decades for a despairing attitude toward corruption. The picture ends with the bawling baby Alpha protesting love for Pa, while Scott tells the pair that they must trust no man and forces the whimpering babies to leave their home forever. The movie makers who put out the Rin Tin Tin pictures didn't take themselves so seriously that they felt the need to break kids' hearts. This movie sends kids out destroyed. It's preposterously ill-conceived. And that was. I think she also said elsewhere that like if a talking dolphin movie was the most imaginative thing that Mike Nichols could come up with, that he should quit filmmaking. That does sort of reveal that in the movie the dolphins kind of do actually learn to speak English. Which, yes.
That's a little bit of a stretch. Like, I don't know if the dolphins, have, the actual, physical abilities to form, the morphemes of English, whether they
don't have, from what I've read, they don't have vocal cords, so they could not speak the way they do in this movie.
Although I do love how they, love, pa, they do, a little dolphin.
Love, pa.
Yeah, one of the best parts of the movie is, basically the sus people from the Franklin Foundation come over and, they, are trying to kind of evaluate the dolphin for, the plan they have to put this mine in the bottom of the presidential yacht. And, they're interrogating the dolphin, basically, and the trainer, and they're like, how far can he swim in a day, and follow, how long can he swim, without stopping or whatever, and follow be like, 1 day, or whatever, and they'd be like, what does this mean, 1 day? It's like, well, he understands distance in terms of time, or whatever, and they'll, and they're like, they start asking him philosophical questions. They'll be like, Fa, he's called Fa, which is short for Alpha, because he's the first dolphin, I guess, in the program. And they're like, Fa, is man good? And Fa's like, man good. And
no, he says, why is man good?
And he goes, smooth. Because he likes the way that we feel. We feel and they're like, not very philosophical, and George C. Scott retorts at one point, smoothness is pleasure, and pleasure to Fa is good, so that is philosophical. But anyway,
at one point, one of these evil Foundation billionaires tells
there's a German
the dolphins,
guy,
just this evil asshole, and we'll talk in a second about the maybe the subliminal message behind that whole scene, but he tells the dolphins that there's a shark in the waters with them, and they freak out and they swim out, they leap over the whole cage and swim away.
he starts off going like, suppose there is like a shark, in the pool, he's like trying to be hypothetical, and it's like there is such an entity as a shark, like is a shark, and then George C. Scott's like, well, he doesn't understand hypotheticals,
something either is or is not.
Yeah, exactly. And so then he says, like, there is a shark in this tank, and he's trying to, like, set that up as, like, a conditional sentence, like, that, like, so then, like, is that good, or whatever. But,
yeah, but they just freak out.
Instantly, like, bolt. Yeah, and, George C. Scott says, like, they've never been lied to before, they
the dolphin eventually comes back, and I think Fogg goes, man said things not. Like the dolphin, like, encountering a lie for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's there are aspects of this, and this kind of maybe ties into, like, why I think certain people such as Pauline Kael, like, reacted badly to the movie, or saw, like, the idea fundamentally as being juvenile, like, or associate, with kids, because associating something with children is one of, like, the, core ways to mean something, or to, but I think, like, I like, part of the thing is, like, there is a little bit of, like, a noble savage thing of, like, we're corrupting the dolphins, and there's this sort of thing of, like, anthropomorphism, like Pauline Kael, I think, even brings that up, like, you're turning the dolphins into these, these babies, like, you're putting them on the level of, like, human babies. I read, like, an interesting study, and, the whole thing of anthropomorphism, I'll talk about it, like, I think there's something to it, in that, like, on one hand, people say anthropomorphism, like, and they think of, like, March of the Penguins or whatever, where it's like, mommy penguin, like, says to be, and it's like they're putting this whole narrative of stuff, and, like, there are cases where people anthropomorphize animals, and,
or,
like, it's
my octopus lover or whatever.
Or, calling an octopus, like, a queer dyke from outer space, I don't know, but anyway, like, or whatever, but, I think that there are certain cases where people take it overboard, and, like, it could be considered unserious or unscientific or unscholarly, but there's a double side of it, which is, like, I actually think there's an interesting quote. This is, again, a quotation that I used in my paper that I'm going to draw from a little bit here about anthropomorphism. So, like, it comes from this guy, like, who wrote a book about, like, animal emotions, or something like that. Animal feelings. What was the book called? Let me see if I can find it. He had an interesting interaction with some people at SeaWorld, like, relative to the goal of his book. It's called When Elephants Weep is the name of the book. And his quote is, he said, looking for information about how trainers work with the emotions of animals they used in shows, I approached the public relations director at SeaWorld in San Diego. So we all know, like, how nefarious SeaWorld is from, like, maybe watching The Cove and Blackfish. Anyway, so he told me bluntly that he disapproved of the notion of animal emotions and would not permit SeaWorld to be associated with my research because it smacked of anthropomorphism. I was therefore astonished to see shows there in which killer whales and dolphins were trained to wave, shake hands, and splash water to spectators. They had been trained to behave like people, more precisely like people who had been bent and formed into amusing slaves in the service of commercial exploitation. Another interesting thing is that dolphins, like, don't like the sound of applause, but we're always, like, encouraged at these shows to, like, like, clap for them, and, like, but their ears are so sensitive, but anyway, so like, I think I found another interesting study while researching for this episode, which was entitled, Are You Smarter Than a Cetacean? And basically what they did in that study was they primed, like, respondents by sort of talking about human mortality and, like, how all people die or whatever. And then after that, they would, give them some article about dolphin intelligence. And what they found, like, contrast to a control where people weren't primed to think about death or to think about, like, human mortality, like, the people who were primed in that way would then be like, fuck dolphins, like, they would get pissed off at the idea that dolphins were, more intelligent than humans or were as intelligent as humans because that would make them feel like creaturely, that would make them sensitive to like their animalness, So I think
is that's wrapped up. That's sort of based on something called terror management theory, right?
Yeah. That's the idea. That like terror management theory was kind of the premise of this. That like people would get disgusted at dolphins because of the terror that it would create by association. The idea that a dolphin, which is an animal, is like as smart as a human, makes a human like, more of an animal, and animals like are, expendable and they die, whereas a human being like to think of as being something more. Yes. And like not a creature, which is, interesting because like a creature feeling. There's like that whole idea from Otto of like a creature feeling and mysterium tremendum. The idea of being like humbled before like an experience of like a numinous being or of like deity, and like feeling like a creation, which I guess is scary. And I think that can, if dolphins are associated with that, and I think that part of that might have to do with why people hated the movie Day of the Dolphin, because the implication that dolphins are intelligent combined with a sort of cynicism about human politics, like and the whole idea, at the very end of the movie, like where George C. Scott has to be like, no, Fa, like, go, like, man, bad, like, you must, like, Fa, go to water, like, Pa, go to land.
Fa, not
like,
talk to man. Man is bad. Eat, swim, play, not talk.
Yeah, exactly. He basically, like, it's sort of like a corruption that he's been taught to talk. There's actually even the scene where, like, the people who were, the sort of good guys, George C. Scott and his group, who at this, they're talking about the plot, and they're, talking about how they're probably going to kill Fa, because Fa can talk, and that makes him a witness. So there's like, he's been entangled in all these, like, filthy, human, sordid conspiracies.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.